Coogs House. The Houston Cougars are rolling. They are 12-0 to start the season. Things look like they're off to a great start. Defensive masterpiece on Thursday night, but why do they need a break so bad?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. They break down all things Cougs. If you're a U of H fan or just a hater who can't stop by, please be sure to subscribe down below. That way you can lay us on the Cougs in your newsfeed each and every day. Appreciate you making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. If you found us on YouTube, welcome back to the YouTube channel. It's so good to see you again. Remember to subscribe, doing a giveaway every 250 subscribers on YouTube, and we're approaching that 2,000 mark. We're up over 1,800, closing in on 1,850. So hit subscribe, help us get there, like and comment on the video, let us know you're in the contest. If you don't know what to say after talking about basketball this whole time, more here for the football recruiting talk, you just don't know what to do, you're so dumbfounded by the defense the Houston Cougars played, tell us in the comments down below, well, based on what I'm having for dinner on Friday night, because I'm having some dinner with some friends and family, do you consider Chicago-style pizza? All right, so we're going to be doing a lot of recap on the basketball game that was Thursday night. Houston played the Texas State Bobcats. What a mascot. My elementary school's mascot was actually the Bobcats. I'm going to be talking about the Texas State Bobcats and Houston Cougars basketball game and kind of the bigger impacts of that game, both in the short and long terms. And then kind of what we took away from as far as some potential lineup stuff. First segment, we're looking at the defensive masterpiece that was the game. Stars of the game will be making their appearance in the second segment. And the last segment, we're looking at who gets to play that small ball four. But in this game, Houston won 72-37. You heard that correctly, 72-37. Now, it was the first time since 2015 that Texas State was held below 40 points in a basketball game, in a full-length basketball game. They've been averaging 73 points per game this season. They're held to about half that, if my math is correct, 37-73. It's about half, not quite half, but about half. They shot 45% from the field on the year coming into this game. They were held to 28.9% from the field in this game. They're getting 13 turnovers per game, just 13 turnovers per game Texas State was getting. They had 16 turnovers in this game at halftime. Houston turned Texas State over 27 total times in the game. They went the first 6 minutes of the game without scoring. They went the first 8 minutes of the second half without a field goal. For what it's worth, I just want to check who they played this season for common opponents. When Texas State went to UT Austin, who will obviously be playing later this year, we're not played yet, they put up 58 points and had just 13 turnovers, right? So they had a much better offensive outing against those Orange Cows. Now, I will say it's interesting to see this game. If you look at the box score, like, wait a second, Texas State actually out-rebounded Houston 39-37. That rarely happens, and certainly is a rarity in a Houston Cougar win. Much of what Houston does is based on getting second and third opportunities, getting a bunch of offensive rebounds, and, for what it's worth, getting more possessions than the other team. You do that by rebounding the basketball. But Houston did not out-rebound Texas State, and frankly, there are a lot of people that count this as a defensive stat. So, like, Parker, what are you talking about? That's a defensive stat that did not go away. Kelvin Sampson, the post-game, said that he did not think rebounding mattered as much when you have that many forced turnovers. Now, I think his logic's actually pretty sound here. Work with me. The theory is that rebounding the basketball is securing your team the ball, right? If it's on their miss or your miss, it's giving you the ball with a chance to score one more time. A turnover, forcing a turnover, and is in essence the exact same thing. So when you lump turnovers forced and rebounds together, Houston had 37 rebounds and 27 turnovers forced. I'm not great at math here, but that's 64 total. And then Houston only committed 12 turnovers and only gave up 39 rebounds. That's not great at math here, but what, 51 total? Math's hard. But what I'm getting at is that they actually win the cumulative there on creating possessions. Not quite that he's not being that analytical, but Kelvin Sampson did finish up later by saying the storyline of the game should be that 37 points, and that's really hard to do. And I do think that that's really hard to do when you look at how, Texas State, I think it's a bad rap for a number of reasons. Mostly because, they're another team that got steamrolled by Houston in this deal, and people like to act like Houston doesn't play anybody. But Texas State is going to end up having, I'd imagine, a relatively solid Sun Belt season when you look at who they have to play and other teams in that conference and so on. Now, yes, they're going to run into Arkansas State, and yes, there's other teams in the conference that are good at basketball, and only one team from the conference is going to get to go to the big dance. I don't know that it's Texas State by any stretch or what have you. But I do think that that's a team that had a lot more success against a difficult schedule offensively coming into this basketball game. And Houston, again, held them to 37 points. 37 points. Houston shot the ball really, really poorly. And for what it's worth, they were almost there at halftime as far as 37. They almost had enough points in the game to win the game by halftime. They were that close. And I think that's kind of, interesting to see that the defensive effort lasted so long, or it was start to finish in this game, regardless of how bad the offense was. Now, Houston does get a break here after playing their butts off from an effort perspective on Thursday night. They have 9 days until their next game. It sounds like they have no basketball activities until the 26th. Kelvin Sampson said in the postgame he doesn't want to see these guys for 4 days. I'd imagine they probably also don't want to see him, but I'm not going to put words in their mouths. In this game, we know Terrence Arsenault has been hurt, right? In this game alone, you had Jamal Shead took a hit to the gut hip area early, had to come out for a second. Javier Francis bumped knees and Ramon Walker and kind of turned his ankle on the way down and out of bounds. Had a limp off, but he did end up coming back in and playing. Right, and then the story from injury perspective is Jawan Roberts, who's been dealing with a knee injury for what sounds like about 3 weeks, where it's not getting demonstrably worse by him playing, but he is playing injured. He fell down in the middle of the first half, and kind of a scary moment. We had to get help walking to the bench. We were told he didn't come back in the game. Obviously Jojo Tugler took over his job for most of the second half. We were told on the telecast, it sounds like it was actually in this game a quad contusion, coincidentally on the same leg. But I will tell you, again, I've not had the exact same injuries that Jalen's going through. I don't mean to say or sound like I get it or whatever, and so I don't mean for this to get back to him like that. But if you're already compensating for a bum knee, you're probably putting a lot of extra pressure just by walking with a bum knee on your quads, right? And so then to have the quad contusion, and those deep bruises can be very painful for the initial 12 to 18 hours. That's a lot of pain, right? That's a lot. He was grimacing on the sidelines and those kind of things. I will say the nice thing about a contusion, though, is that by 9 days from now when Houston plays Penn, it hopefully is mostly worked out. Now, the knee thing may still be there, but hopefully the contusion itself is mostly worked out, if that's really what's going on. And I don't mean to say that they have any reason to lie to us. I just, I imagine that there's a lot of things going on with a lot of guys being all kinds of banged up. Now, the big reason for this big gap in time between games is that Houston is going to give the guys off some time for the holidays. And if you're looking for something to buy your loved ones for the holidays, a big thing right now is an experiential kind of thing, going out and doing something. And what better way to get tickets and go to Game Time? Get the Game Time app. Use code Locked On College for $20 off tickets to anything going on in the H. You can find tickets to concerts, sporting events, theater, anything, comedy shows, whatever you have going on in Houston. You can find tickets at Game time, so use the code Locked On College for $20 off. They have all kinds of cool ways to make sure you're getting the best price. You can see exactly like where your seat's going to look like and what the view from your seat will look like on their app. You can also, like, if you're kind of, these all feel the same, you can give them a section you want to sit in. They'll pick the seat in row. You get an average of 18% savings in that instance. So why not give the gift of something to experience this holiday season? Go to Game Time, download the Game Time app, use code Locked On College. That's promo code Locked On College, LOCKED ONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, so I have to say that it's interesting in looking at this game because I typically, and they start the Game Time segment, would be, admittedly, reading off like LJ Cryer, 22 points, 5 of 9 from 3, great shooting night. Jamal Shead, 7 assists, just 1 turnover, or great offensive stats typically fill up your stars of the game moment. Unfortunately for Houston, or I guess fortunately for, I don't know how to describe it. As great as they played defensively, they played pretty bad offensively. And I know they ended up scoring by the end of the game 72 points. They kind of went on some runs. Defense turned to offense, kind of some good layups and da. But in looking at this game specifically, Houston shot the ball very poorly in the first half. On the season, their numbers look fairly similar. Like on the season, they're shooting about 43.5% from the field. On Thursday night, shot about 43.5%. 43.3% from the field. But at halftime, it was down more like 36-37, right? They're shooting 35% from 3 on the season this year. And I think the reason it felt so noticeable on Thursday night was they shot just 21% from 3. Now, Houston, with how great their guards are, relies a lot on that 3-point shot, whether it's Cryer or Sharp or Shead or Dunn or whomever. They rely a lot on their guards hitting those threes, and that's kind of why the offense feels like it flows. With so many turnovers in this game, they obviously got on transition, had a bunch of transition points, and so it's not quite the same. I mean, Houston forced 27 turnovers, had 27 points off turnovers. It's not always that clean, right, to go 1-to-1 like that. But that made up for a lot of the poor 3-point shooting and a lot of the poor, frankly, mid-range shooting as well. Kind of brought the overall shooting percentage up on this game. I know I'm supposed to be talking about stars of the game. I'm just giving a long explanation as to why these numbers are very meh on the start of the game. But like Emmanuel Sharp shot just 2 of 10 from the field, right? And I think it really is to say like that's probably, and I don't have every single one of his game logs in front of me. I'd imagine 2 of 10 from the field is the worst shooting of his career at Houston, let alone this season, right? But what I would give Emmanuel Sharp a star of the game kind of moment for is a couple things. One, his defense was incredible. He's doing all kinds of tough guy things now. Now, he's always been a little stouter, a little sturdier. But he's diving in front of guys, trying to take charges. He's putting his chest in front of guys, cutting off sidelines. He's going up and fighting for rebounds, colliding with people in midair, and giving extra possessions to Houston and those kinds of things that are all qualitative, not quantitative. I don't have a stat for them necessarily, but he's doing a lot more of the dirty work. And then inversely on offense, it's translating into a much more versatile or diverse score. Emmanuel Sharp was sharpshooter last year, right? He was just from 3. So that was his thing. Eventually got to where he hit a 2-step pull-up if you came out and covered up too much, right? Thursday night, he's 2 of 10 from behind the arc, or 2 of 10 from the game, 2 of 9 from behind the arc. But he got to the fouling. The same guy that's doing the dirty work on defense is doing a great job of attacking the rim, going through contact, taking fouls, getting to free throw line. He went 11 for 11 from the foul line, right? Now, he's one of the best free throw shooters on the team. I'm not saying that like the 11 for 11 part is obviously it's great shoot 100%. That's not the impressive part to me. The impressive part to me is that there were 11 free throws. A guy that's typically known as a jump shooter don't typically get fouled shooting jump shots. You don't typically see those guys get 11 free throws. When he sees that his shot's not falling, he finds other ways to score, right? That's where he gets a star of the game from me for, right? Is the dirty work he's doing on defense, and then finding ways to be a part of the game plan on offense. The other guy is got to be Javier Francis. Now, Javier is averaging like 5 points per game this season. He played 22 minutes, so just 22 minutes on Thursday night. They go small a lot of times and don't put him in those small lineups. And frankly, Texas State was not tall, so they didn't have to get out of the small lineups a whole lot, right? But in just 22 minutes of play, he had 13 points on 5 of 5 from the field, right? And I thought it was interesting in watching this game that there was very clearly a directive in the early parts of the first half to feed the post. A lot of high lows from Jawan to him, a lot of low highs, frankly, from him to Jawan. A lot of work being done between the posts. It was clearly a focal point at the start of the basketball game in a way that felt like it was for Houston last year with Jarris and Jawan down at the post guys, right? A lot of high-low actions between Jarris and he last year to start games. This year you had today or Thursday night, you had Javier being the focal point to start the game. 5 of 5 and like several traditional post-ups. He got fouled on one and went to the free throw line. He's not a great free throw shooter. He did go 3 of 7 from the free throw line, so obviously some work to do there. But I'd go back to just 22 minutes. He had 2 blocks and a steal, a couple of the deflections, and at least one that sticks out of my head. I don't know how you count like a shot deferment or whatever, but like he is just present in the lane, and guys are like, I can't shoot this right now. Those kinds of things, right? Really, really impressive game from Javier on Thursday night. And I have to say, frankly, that we dog him pretty hard when he plays poorly because, frankly, he's like of the core group, the starter group, the key rotational guys. He's a guy that like is kind of needs to, turn into a veteran really quickly. He didn't play much as a freshman at all. Didn't play a whole lot last year because Jared showed up and took a lot of the minutes. And I was like, hey, Javier, you need to grow up, man, right? We're kind of rushing him into this instead of like progressing him into it. Kelvin's always really great at pointing that and reminding us of that. I thought on Thursday night, he looked like a guy that's played a lot of basketball. Hopefully he does the same thing against Penn, then goes into West Virginia on January 6th and does the same kinds of things, right? 2 of the guys, obviously, you could always talk about Jamal Shead, so I won't belabor it too much. Jamal Shead had another one of his like highlight reel type of blocks in this game where he caught the ball. I couldn't quite tell if he pinned off the rubber on the bottom of the backboard or not, but it looked like he blocked a guy's shot and caught it. The guys on TV were debating whether it would be a steal or a block. I think it's a block and a rebound, but I'm not a statistician. Tremendous defensive effort from him, obviously. 11 points in his own right. Only 1 or 2 from behind the arc, and the step back 3 he hit was really, really smooth. 50% shooting, and a game that, frankly, Houston shot the ball really poorly. Houston shot the ball 43%. Jamal Shead shot the ball 50%, right? I would also argue he did end up with just 2 assists, which is relatively low for him on his season, last couple seasons, frankly. But if Houston shoots the ball better, he passed in some great shots and some great looks. On the whole, I would actually argue Houston had a lot of great looks that did not go in. Jamal Shead set several of those up. If guys hit their shots, he gets a few more assists, might have had a much more stellar stat line. And then obviously the great defense he played in the course of this game. I will shout out, he went right directly by, and like a little hesitation blow by move, went right by Colton Benson in a very, if you're a Central Texas person, Jamal went to Manor. Colton from Texas State went to Bowie, went right by him. And I know that, the old Bowie coach, Coach Collier, there's a legendary coach in Central Texas. He would have been flipping out about Colton Benson going to run right by. But Jamal Shead does that to people. He just does that to people. And then Jojo Tugler was asked to a lot more in this game with the absence of Jawan Roberts after his injury. Jamal Andrews played 8 minutes. That meant Tugler played 19. Tugler's stat line, just 4 points, 2 blocks, a steal, and 4 rebounds, is not as stellar, does not give the full story of the energy that guy brings every time he steps on the floor. If you've got more clever ways to analytically dissect that with like some sort of a statistic or quantitative data, I'd love to know about it because, frankly, I'm running out of ways to qualitatively talk about the impact that Jojo Tugler brings. He's just an energy, high motor guy. I cannot believe we get to keep him in Houston, hopefully for a long, long time. The longer he gets to play under Kelvin and get one-on-one work with Kellen in the big man room is going to be awesome. Great night from Jojo, and frankly, on a night we needed it with J1 being down. Really, really important night as well. Now, speaking of things that are important, it is getting a little cold outside. And whether it's colder, the NFL offers are getting hot over at FanDuel, because right now you can put a $5 bet down on a money line, get $150 back in bonus bets if your money line bet wins. It's $150 if your team wins. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action than this weekend, where the Houston Texans are a 2.5-point dog at home. Not a whole lot of faith in our boy Case Keenum, Cougar Case Keenum. They don't have a whole lot of faith in him, apparently, starting at quarterback for the injured C.J. Stroud. The moneyline bet is plus 122 Houston's way. Again, $5 on that. If Houston wins, you get $150 back in bonus bets. So visit FanDuel.com/locked on and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, I said in the last segment I want to talk some about the small ball 4 spot, because I think we saw two different glimpses, especially when Jojo Tugler had to fill in for Jawan, as to who could replace Terrence Arsenault in that spot. We saw a lot more Malik Wilson minutes, and we saw a lot more Ramon Walker minutes. Now, I think the interesting thing here between these two, and we may talk about this leading up to the Penn game, we'll see. But the interesting thing between these two is they're kind of opposites or inverses of one another, right? Malik Wilson is tall, long, flies through the air, very graceful. Aesthetically, he's finishing with both hands, finger rolling around the rim. Pretty basketball. Not say he's like a pretty boy or whatever by any stretch, but pretty basketball. Ramon Walker is a junkyard dog. Ramon Walker is a 6'4" power forward. Ramon Walker he's been on the floor 5. He's been on the court 5 minutes, but I have to specify because he's actually been on the floor 7 times, right? Like, he's that kind of a guy that has always got his body parallel to the ground, either leaping for a loose ball, diving because he's poked a steal loose, flying in for a rebound at a 60-degree angle. He's always doing something chaotic, right? And both guys, because of their unique size and skill sets, can kind of be a swingman 3, can kind of be a guard, and in the case of this Houston Cougar basketball team, can kind of be that small ball 4 that Terrence Arsenault was as well. Now, Malik can cover 1 through 4 and can play 1 through 3 offensively. He's got the length and verticality to kind of help go get rebounds and transition. He's one of the fastest guys on the team, and he can levitate. I'm really impressed every time I see Malik play by his second explosion. And basketball training and coaches talk about that a lot, but like, you got to explode horizontally to get to the rim and then vertically to get up to the rim. He does the second explosion incredibly quick and incredibly well. He's really, really good at those kinds of athletic things. Offensively, we're still finding where his shots will fall, but he finishes around the rim really well. And in transition, he might be as good as it gets on Houston, right? But defensively, he played some at Tech a long time ago, but didn't get to play a lot. And then he went to the Sun Belt Conference before coming to Houston ultimately and redshirting last year. All of that is to say, I'm talking a long way around this, Houston's defense is faster than any defense he's ever played in. And it's become very apparent that there are times where everyone else is moving at such a fast speed. He seems to be, and this is me talking through it, he almost looks a step behind. That is, like, if they're, double teaming at the right top corner and he's got to help the helper and he's got to slide over and do this kind of, he's like processing who's on first and what coverage they're kind of running on the backside of this. And he's a little slow, right? A little late, those kinds of things, right? Now, it's still faster than you and I would do it. It's still faster than most of college basketball players would do it. But for Houston, it's a little slow. And the entire theory behind the amount of ball pressure Houston puts on is You've got to put that kind of ball pressure on. You got to be all moving on a string, because otherwise there's any, leakage in the dam. It's kind of a layup because you're selling out to go stop the stuff up top, right? That's really, really problematic from your power forward, which is effectively what the small ball four will be doing, right? Inversely, Ramon Walker is never late on those things. Ramon Walker is the driving force in being able to do those kinds of things. His aggression, his innate sense to find the ball and know where things are going to happen is what makes him a great defender. He does all those things in the back line, those kind of rotations that Malik is still learning. Ramon does them very well and has done them very well for Sampson because he's been in the system for a while. We saw when guys went down a couple of years ago, he stepped in and made game-winning, literally, plays defensively, right? He's that kind of a guy. However, on offense, we're still kind of figuring out, even this far into his career, what to do with him besides kind of have him as a power forward, drop the ball to him spot, right? Because he can handle the ball, but he's not like going to get to the rim against intense ball pressure, handle the ball, right? He can get hot shooting the three, but I would not call him like a legacy shooter by any stretch, right? He can go through contact, but he's not like the best free throw shooter on the team or anything like that. I say all that to say that offensively, he's the kind of guy, skill set wise, that you want to, drive and dish it to and drop it off to from about 4 feet away. But he's only about 6'4", and so getting him the ball about 4 feet away at 6'4" is not quite as effective as it is to get to a traditional power forward in that spot. You're kind of leaving yourself vulnerable in that. If he's not hot from three, where you could space him out, at least like you make him a spacer there in the corner, you got a problem. And so whichever one of these guys can kind of find their footing first, I think will ultimately kind of get to swallow the Terrence Arsenault minutes. Now, the other day, Coach Kelvin Sampson mentioned that he thinks he thinks that Ramon Walker's gonna have a big role now. And ultimately, we know that Sampson loves his guys. He loves rewarding, being around. He loves rewarding guys that have learned a lot. He loves rewarding, frankly, experience, and he's got some trust in that experience from Ramon. And frankly, we know how much he wished he could have played Ramon more last year, and then things kind of went the way they went. So I think Ramon's going to get the first crack at it. And frankly, this is the coach in me. It's easier to learn offensive stuff than it is to learn defensive stuff. And that actually kind of gives Ramon a big advantage here, right? He just needs to find one or two things he can complement Shead, Cryer, Sharp, Dunn, etc. offensively with. A way to complement them and not get in their way and not clog up the lane for them. And he'll be all right because we know the things he brings defensively. Now, this is obviously being a small ball forward. It's not a permanent solution. This is not, the reason Terrence was so good and the reason Terrence is going to go pro one day is because Terrence did all of these things, right? Terrence is really, really good at basketball. And we can't wait to have him be really, really good at basketball post-injury when he makes the comeback. But in the time being, that for right now, we've got to find ways to plug those holes. And I really do think that's going to come down to who wins this matchup. And I do give Ramon a slight edge because I know he's going to get a shot first. And I think the offensive stuff is easy to learn. Now, I will say that Malik has all the athletic tools to learn the defensive side of this thing. And so I'm not counting him out by any stretch. I just want the Cougars to win some basketball games. And I think it's going to come down to one of those guys kind of learning the skill set that they're lacking, the other one kind of has. It's an interesting back and forth. If you got other thoughts, tell me in the comments down below, or tell me wherever you found this podcast. You can find me on social media to talk about these kind of things too, on all your social media platforms, wherever you talk about Houston Cougar things. I am at Painsworth512, PAINSWORTH 5121 on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, whatever your social media is. That's where you can find me. Thank you all so much for tuning in today. If you're looking for a second listen, Sports Podcast of the Year nominee, Locked On College Basketball, does a great job breaking down all things across the entire college basketball landscape each and every day. Just go follow them, check them out, and then go vote for them in Sports Podcast Awards as well. Locked On Coogs is probably Locked On Podcast, and with them is your team, our Coug, Kelvin Sampson's Cougs every day. Go Cougs.